Those of us who make our own clothes know that taking the time to make a toile or muslin and altering our sewing patterns to fit our own bodies are steps we ought to take. We know that they'll result in better fitting garments that we'll want to wear more often. But these steps can feel like huge hurdles when you don't know what to do with a toile or muslin once you've made it. This week, drafting and fitting expert Kate Roberts from Project Patterns is joining us again to answer a ton of questions that will lift the lid on the whole process. By the end of this episode, I all but guarantee that you'll have the confidence to give fitting a go. So stick around a couple of minutes for that. Welcome to Check Your Thread, the podcast that will help you sew more sustainably. My name's Zoe and I'm obsessed with sewing. I've been blogging about it for over 16 years and I'm the creator and host of the popular handmade wardrobe challenge Me Made May. But, like many people, I've become increasingly concerned about the climate crisis and I'm looking at the way that my lifestyle contributes to it. So in this podcast, I'll be nerding out about making and fitting clothes whilst exploring how to minimise the negative impact that it may have. I really hope you'll join me in this journey. How you doing, lovely listener? Thanks heaps for choosing to hit play on this episode. I just want to let you know that I'm taking a 2-week break from releasing podcast episodes for the Easter break. My kids will be at home, or actually more accurately, they'll not be in school. None of us will be home because we need to leave the house for a couple of weeks whilst we're having some building work done. So the next new episode will be in your feeds the week beginning the 28th of April. So have you had any sustainability wins lately? Here's one that was submitted by a lovely patron of the podcast, Serena. Serena says, during the weekend, I went to a clothes swap with my almost 13-year-old daughter, and it was a success. It was a first for me as well, so I wasn't sure how much of the offering would fit and suit her, but it turns out most extra small and small fit her, and small sizes were prevalent. We had a lot of fun trying improbable outfits. From next year, we are thinking of giving her a budget for clothes and shoes and letting her administer it, so I'm keen to show her what the options are there. This is such an interesting topic, and actually getting our loved ones on board with making more sustainable choices is something that comes up quite often in the Check Your Thread Patreon community chat spaces. This month in the Patreon community, we have a new monthly theme to think about. It's Allotment April. Those who wish to are thinking about and discussing all manner of growing plans and garden improvements. And it's been so lovely to see different people's growing spaces and hear about their goals. You won't believe me when I say that this theme wasn't actually my idea, but obviously I am loving it. I'd also like to say a huge thanks to Marianne, Michelle, Marissa, Dorothy, Tyler, Sally, Julia and Imka, all of whom kindly signed up to support the podcast via Patreon over the last 2 weeks. Massive thanks to all the patrons past and present for helping me cover my expenses so I can get this podcast out to each week. Well, not for the next 2 weeks, but you know what I mean. So let's get cracking with this week's episode. Kate is such an amazing font of knowledge and she shares so much useful stuff in this conversation. If you'd like to have access to Kate's knowledge and her lovely teaching style, stick around until the end of this episode when she tells us all about how we can work with her directly. Thanks so much to Kate for talking to me, and thanks also to the wonderful patrons who submitted these awesome questions that Kate tackled. So until the 28th of April, take care of yourself, take care of your loved ones, think about how you can apply Kate's tips to your own garment making, and enjoy! Sometimes I get nervous. Sometimes I get very caffeinated and it feels like nerves. It's hard to tell sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe that's it actually. I've had 2 coffees, so maybe that's the
Okay. Because of course you've been on the podcast before, haven't you?
I know. It does feel like a long time ago though.
I know, a year. It was at least a year and a half since we last spoke. So I'm so happy that you've come back to talk to us again and talk more about self-drafting and pattern fitting, because of course these are key aspects to sewing more sustainably, to making clothes that really fit your body really well, so you want to keep wearing them for as long as possible. So for anyone who hasn't heard your previous episodes, which are 95 and 96, or who needs a memory jog, can you please tell us who you are, where you are, and what fills your days?
Okay, so hey, I'm Kate. Thank you so much for having me. It's nice to be back. So I am a professional pattern cutter. I split my time between making commercial patterns for the fashion industry, and that includes things that you'll see in store, things that you see on red carpets, things that you see on royals, things that you see on celebrities. That's half my time, and then the other half of the time I teach people to make their own sewing patterns. And that's not just how to draft from scratch, which of course we do, but also how to fit them to your unique body. So my time is spent drafting patterns, filming courses, teaching students, and so much more in between.
Amazing. So we're going to get a bit more into what exciting things you've been up to and the exciting things you've got coming up that the listeners might be interested in towards the end of the conversation. But first, we're going to have a bit of a deep dive into self-drafting and fitting. And of course, I turned to the amazing Check Your Thread patrons to see what burning questions that they had on these topics. So I specifically asked for questions that were quite general this time, because I know that we covered some quite specific questions last time. So this one's, I wanted to keep it very broad so that the information is going to be really valuable to everybody who's listening. I also made it clear that there needn't be any assumption of any prior knowledge or experience, so there's no stupid questions. I've already sent you these questions, so I know you've had a chance to mull them over. So let's start with a couple of questions about the entry costs to actually starting these processes. So we've got a question from Dawn. Dawn asks, what tools are recommended for pattern drafting or modifying a commercial pattern to better fit? And then Vic has a follow-on question to that, similar to above. What basic tools are recommended, and are there hacks around needing to buy lots of new equipment? I've watched YouTube videos on drafting and they all use different tools. Is there a way of just eyeballing things too?
Okay, so I love this question because I am really guilty when I start a new hobby of buying all the gear. I am that classic all the gear, no idea kind of girl. So I have lots of freshly started but never continued hobbies that I've wasted a lot of money on. So I would say try not to waste loads of money on your new hobbies. Like
do what I say, not what I do.
Exactly. So really, when you're making your own patterns or you're adapting patterns to fit you, you really need a pencil, some scissors, and a ruler. You can get away with all your other normal stuff. Now, of course, within pattern cutting, we do have specialist rulers. And if you are going to invest in one piece of kit, that's what I would say you need to invest in.
What type would you recommend? Because there's tons,
There
isn't there?
There are so many. I like a pattern master, and that's the one that you see. It's kind of like wide and long. It's quite big. It's got nice curves on it. And that curve is really great for things like armholes and necklines and stuff like that. I really like that one because that's what I learned to use when I was a student, so it feels really natural. Other people really like things like set squares or French curves. I like the Pattern Master because you have a straight edge and a curve all in one.
See, I learnt with one of the big triangles.
Set square.
So I've still got mine from university. Yeah, I use it all the time.
Yeah, actually, I've still got my original Pattern Master from uni as well. Yeah, I thought I'd lost it, and then I found it in my bookcase the other day. I was so happy.
Awesome. Okay, so that's good. And then, because, I mean, most people that are listening to this podcast are already garment sewers, so they've already got pins, I don't know what else, and the equipment to make toiles, for example.
Yeah, you've already got things like a tracing wheel or stuff like that. And even if you don't have a tracing wheel, you can get around not having one. It's useful, but you can get around not having it.
What paper would you suggest?
Ideally, pattern paper, so dot and cross paper. It's comes in different widths. It's slightly opaque. It's about 50 or 60 GSM, and it has dots and crosses on it, spaced at about 2 or 2.5 centimeters. Really, really useful when you're drafting your patterns. But again, it's not essential. If you have a large format paper at home, if you have access to it, and maybe you're an architect or something, you can use that as well. That's totally fine. Some of my students use brown paper in a pinch. It has its pitfalls because obviously it's not opaque, so you can't see through it. Tracing is more difficult, but it does the job if you're in a pinch.
Awesome. Okay, fantastic. Okay, right. So moving on to what we're going to even fit. So Deborah asks, is it worth drafting a body or pants block? If so, can you use it to help adjust commercial patterns to fit? Or can you use them to just go wild and draft any style by adapting that block?
100% worth it. 100%. So you can use it for both. And this is the great thing about blocks. So the first way that you can use a block, as I said there, is you can take your block and you can change it into multiple different styles with endless possibilities. You just need to have the skills to be able to do that and the knowledge, right? So I can take my trouser block and I can literally create any type of trouser I want to from that one block.
Do you have blocks for your own body?
I do actually, yeah. Although my body shape has changed quite a lot recently, so I'm in the process of updating my blocks.
How often do you think you should update your blocks?
Depends how often your body changes.
Okay.
I try to leave it as long as possible, right? Because it's a long process. But I recently have gone from about a size 8 to a size 12 in the space of 12 months. I injured myself and I couldn't exercise like I normally do. So my body's really changed shape. And I'm now at the point that like I've got to redraft. I've got to create something new. But if your body stays pretty consistently, then you don't really need to update your blocks that much. But my advice would be before you start a new project, you've got a toile of your block, put it on, just check that everything still fits the way it does.
And presumably you have your measurements that you took when you created that first block. So just check that those measurements are the same or they're different, presumably.
Yeah, exactly. And check that your posture's not changed as well. You know, if it's been like 2 years since you drafted your blocks, maybe you work at a computer, your shoulders might have changed angle or position slightly. So you just want to check things like that.
Interesting. So then what about the part of Deborah's question was saying, can you use them to help adjust commercial patterns to fit? That seems like a little bit witchcraft.
Look, you can. There are yeses and nos to this question.
Okay.
So let's take our trouser block, for example. Our basic trouser block is a straight leg, semi-fitted trouser block. I can take that trouser block and I can lay it over a similar style trouser pattern to see what the difference is. We can check things like circumference measurements, rise height, dart widths and dart positions, things like that. But what I can't do is take, say, a leggings pattern, which is obviously stretchy, has a much different shape to the rise. I can't take my leggings pattern and my basic trouser block and compare those because they're completely different. They come from a different place. But you can use it for a lot of things, and it's particularly helpful for things like busts and shoulder angles. It doesn't give you the full picture. It gives you some knowledge, and I always think in pattern cutting, the more knowledge you have, the more you can figure out, the better setup you're going to be for your first toile to actually fit.
Love that. Awesome. So let's talk about what you can actually then start to fit. So Susie has a question about how to modify a pattern for body issues. So for Susie, it's upper spinal kyphosis. Sorry if I butchered that word. And Susie says that they struggle to adapt patterns for more fitted tops. So do you have a response for anyone, what you might want to look out for when you're then about to fit a garment or fit a toile?
Yeah, I think particularly with something like this where it's like a medical thing that then changes like the shape and the posture of your body, I think it's really important to analyze your body shape and proportions and posture so that you are really getting an idea of exactly what you need to do. For example, with this shape, from brief bit of research I did, I can see that it kind of creates more of a roundness on the upper back.
Right.
So when I'm analysing that, I would be thinking, well, where exactly is that roundness sitting on this particular body? And how pronounced is that? I could use my tape measure to see how much length I actually need in order to cover the body correctly. I could also compare things like the shoulder angles to see if that's maybe changed in that area. And I would be thinking about the position of any roundness or shape created so that I can position my darts on the position of the highest point of shaping, if that makes sense. So I'm really analyzing exactly what the shape actually is and what my pattern needs in order to shape to it. The issue is never the body, the issue is the pattern. All we need to do is get our pattern to mirror the body of the shape. And it applies for things like busts as well. If we're doing like a full bust adjustment, within a drastic full bust adjustment, you are adding length, you're adding width, and you're making your dart deeper. But when you're doing a bust adjustment, you need to really think, do I need all three of those adjustments? Or could I do a different version of a full bust adjustment where I'm perhaps just adding width and changing my dart width rather than adding length as well? So it's really analysing that body shape and thinking, what exactly do I need here within my adjustment?
Is there any way to get any clues from garments you already own?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can compare things like length, you can compare things like position of shaping. And when I say position of shaping, I mean the dart apex, right? Because the pointy part of the dart apex, that controls where your largest part of your shaping is. So you can take, let's say, again, let's say looking at like a rounded back as an example. We could take a garment that fits perfectly and we could measure the center back length, because we would probably need more length to fit over the roundness. And we could also measure things like dart width. Maybe the dart is 1 centimeter when it's stitched. That means it'll be 2 centimeters when it's unpicked. And we could measure the position of the dart apex, the position of the shaping. Then we could take our block or whatever pattern we are trying to create for ourselves, and we can measure, okay, the center back length here is 3 centimeters less than the garment that fits us. That means we need to add in 3 centimeters, assuming that the neckline and the waist are in the same position, of course.
Great. So would you recommend to Susie that they work on making themselves a block for a fitted bodice block?
I would, yeah. For this case, I think that would be a really great idea.
And then Susie doesn't have to keep adapting pattern after pattern after pattern. You've got that information.
Yeah, exactly. And particularly if there is a particular neckline that they like, you know, your block ideally should have your like most natural neckline, your highest neckline. But if they know that they always like to have a V neckline or something like that, then you can also put that onto your block so that you can easily compare that to patterns or garments that you're going to make for yourself with that type of neckline.
Yeah, right. So similarly, Andrea has something that they often have to do to adapt patterns. So Andrea says, I get confused with adapting length on trousers. Patterns are always drafted with a much taller person in mind. It's great that designers are expanding their size range in terms of bust, etc., and circumference of the body, but no one thinks about the length of torso. I do see shorten and lengthen lines marked on patterns to allow you to shorten the crotch depth, but the impact on pockets, zip and waistbands can be problematic for me. Anyway, after that whinge, I have a specific question. How to calculate crotch depth to take into account the fact that the measurements change from standing to sitting due to redistribution of flesh. So let's think of it more broadly in terms of people that find that because often like patterns are kind of drafted often to a standard, maybe like 5'5", 5'6", aren't they? And there are some pattern companies that are designing patterns for taller or shorter people. For example, there is Bella Loves. I'd like to suggest that Andrea check out Bella Loves. Every single one of their styles, I think bar 1 or 2, comes in 2 heights of 5'3" and 5'7". So there are some pattern companies, and I think, for example, So DIY is specifically for taller people as well. So there are some maybe starting points that will get you there closer sooner. But for people that do find that they need to shorten and lengthen garments regularly, what suggestions do you have? And about, I guess, regarding how those things can have knock-on effects to the other aspects of the garment?
I think it's a really difficult one, because if you're going to adjust one pattern piece and it has other pattern pieces that attach to it, you're going to have to adjust them as well. I wish there was like a way around it, and I wish I had some like clever tip to give here, but unfortunately I don't. But I guess one of the things you could think about is what you're willing to compromise on. So if I was doing this particular adjustment for myself, so shortening the upper part of my trouser because I have a shorter body in that area, and I then had like maybe slanted like traditional tailored pockets on there, which of course, you know, you've got your top pocket bag, your bottom pocket bag, pocket bearer, all those pieces in there. It is annoying that you have to adjust all of them. I would think, where is my bottom of my pocket bag going to hit? If I shorten my trouser leg, but I don't shorten my pocket bags, is that visually going to make my pocket bag look odd on me? Is it going to make it look too long? Maybe the bottom of the pocket bag is going to hit my hip in an odd place. If yes, then of course I'm going to then shorten my pocket bags to match my trouser. But if the answer is no, then you can always just change your front leg to match your pocket bags, right? And then you're just adjusting one piece. So think about those kinds of things, like what you're willing to compromise on. And also think about exactly where it is that you need those length adjustments. Not everyone of 5'3" has the same proportions.
True, because it might be in your kind of upper torso more than, or your legs. Or
Exactly, yeah. Like I know, again, speaking personal experience, I have really long, like waist to crotch basically, and then my torso is really short in comparison. It's not uncommon, right?
Yeah, no gap between boobs and waist. None.
you have to think about that as well. Like, I'm 5'5", but actually trousers made for people who are 5'7" work much better on me because of my body proportions.
Oh my God, we are basically twins.
Yes, I'm a body twin.
So once again, would you recommend to Andrea that perhaps they make their own block and then they can have that and then compare it when there's a new pattern that Andrea might want to try, pop it on and then get that idea of wool adjustments need to be made?
Yeah, absolutely. And even within that block drafting process, you have to do all the fitting for your block, right? It's not that you drafted and it is done. Perfect from there. You have to still fit it. And I think that fitting process is such a great learning experience because your blocks are your body with your minimum amount of wearing ease in. So they are difficult to fit because they're fitted. It's not an oversized garment. So you learn so much just by fitting that block. Then when you compare that to another pattern, you already have a huge wealth of knowledge that you're drawing on.
Oh, amazing. And to address Andrea's second part of the question, how to calculate crotch depth to take into the fact that the measurements change from standing to sitting. Do they change?
In theory, no, they don't. But I think it's great that they've spoken about redistribution of flesh because this does definitely happen, right, when you stand and sit. What I would suggest is that when you measure yourself sitting down. This measurement is called crotch depth normally. You basically sit on a hard surface and then you measure, like mark your waist.
So your natural waist, like the smallest part of your torso.
Yeah, your natural waist. Whether you want to tie some elastic or ribbon around that, whatever you want to do to kind of like really solidify that point of measurement for you. Sit on a hard surface and then get your tape measure and measure from the hard surface up to your waist. So what you're doing is you're basically measuring the distance from the bottom of your pelvic bone up to your natural waist. This is the measurement that I would use when I'm thinking about my crotch depth on my pattern. Of course, you need to add some ease in there. Different trouser styles require different amounts of ease.
Could you give us a ballpark of like in terms of ease?
Oh, it really depends. It's so difficult because something like a fitted jeans will have a totally different amount to like a tailored trouser.
Sure.
I like quite a lot of ease because I spend a lot of my time sitting down, and with my redistribution of flesh, like it can be quite uncomfortable to sit in really tight jeans all day. I'm sure we all know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
So I like to have quite a lot of ease through there, but other people don't like that because it can look quite different. So like I will compromise on how my trousers look when I'm standing up so that they're comfortable when I'm sitting down.
Right. So when you're adding ease, is that basically lowering the crotch point?
Yes. So lowering the crotch point, and also you can add width through your crotch. So making your thigh measurement bigger.
Right. Awesome. Yeah.
You can also add ease by slashing through the upper section of your rise. So cutting from your rise to your side seam and using your side seam as a pivot point and opening that up. So adding a wedge of fabric in there. That's what we do with jeans to make it more tight and fitted through like the lower area of the rise. So around our bum, through our thigh, we make that all much tighter. And then we slash in the upper section of the back rise so that we have extra fabric there. And then when we sit down, it can kind of like rotate around our crotch, if that makes sense.
That is so interesting.
If you think about like your body, if you cut off one leg and looked at the shape of like your pelvic bone, I'm thinking about my mannequin because her leg just comes straight off. Okay. We're like a U shape, right? And then our trouser rise is a U shape. But as we sit down, that U shape kind of needs to like pull backwards and forwards along the U of our body because of the redistribution of our flesh. So you've got to have enough space between your body and the U shape of your trouser to allow for that movement.
Oh, that is so interesting. Oh, anyway, amazing. Thank you. Right, let's move on. Let's get into what happens once you've made a toile and you're trying it on. So Heather has a question. How do you manage fit adjustments if you don't have a fitting buddy to pin you in or make adjustments that you can't reach? And linked to that, Iona's added, what if your range of motion or strength is limited? Any tips on measuring or marking with these limitations?
Okay, this is a difficult one and quite an interesting one. So I guess first let's start with like range of motion. Without knowing the specifics, things that would come to my mind with range of motion that might be challenging are things like doing up your fastenings. So if there's a centre back zip or something, if in a fitted garment, that does require some twisting and arms quite high in the air. So that might be tricky. And then also pinning things like adjustments on your back, or even pinning like on your lower legs, perhaps like bending down might be an issue, those sorts of things. First of all, getting into your garment can be really difficult. If you do have a centre back, what I'd recommend is tying a piece of ribbon to your zip puller, kind of like you get on a wetsuit.
I was just thinking that. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
That is really helpful. You could also think about doing fastenings in areas that are easier for you to reach. So instead of always doing a centre back zip, perhaps we want to do a side zip. That also has its own challenges though. Sometimes you have to like wiggle into your garment. Maybe a centre front opening is a better option.
But so that could be literally like a consideration for the types of garments that you were making in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. Or it could be like immediate for when you start with your pattern. You could immediately be like, well, I know a centre back opening is not going to work for me. So before I do any adjustments, I'm going to put a centre front placket with buttons or zips in here.
Great. Yeah. Great advice.
So that would be my thoughts on a range of motion and getting into your garment and things like that. In terms of pinning and marking onto your garment, whether you have a full range of motion or not, it's always going to be really difficult to mark anything on the back and pin on your back.
Yes.
So what I often suggest is that instead of trying to pin, so let's say you have like excess on your back and you're trying to pin some volume out, instead of actually pinning that out, maybe grab a clip, like a bulldog clip or something like that, and just clip it out roughly, and then just take off your garment and then put some pins in it and try and pin it a little bit more neatly, a little bit more accurately. If you're pinning to nothing, pin out that wedge and then put it back on and reassess. Have you taken too much? Do you need to take a little bit more? If so, again, take it off, pin in your adjustment, put it back on.
Yeah, the answer to Heather is be prepared to do lots of taking on and taking off if you don't have a fitting body.
Yeah, pretty much.
And in terms of how to assess the fit if you are solo, you were suggesting in our previous conversation taking videos, not just a photo, so you can kind of see from other angles.
Yeah, so this is something I do all the time. So I set up my phone on a bookshelf or something that's kind of like a neutral level height, so I'm not getting any perspective issues or anything. It's sort of bang in the middle of my body. And then I just hit record on my video and I'll just stand really neutrally, really relaxed posture, stand there for a couple of seconds, and then I'll slowly rotate on the spot. And then when I get to the side, again, I'll just stand for a couple of seconds, rotate again for the back. I'll then kind of like walk around a little bit, move, like do a couple of things that I would normally have to do, like, I don't know, I always do the tube test if I'm wearing a top, right? Because I'm always on the tube.
Yeah, or if you're on a computer, or if you drive, you want to lean forward.
Yeah, you want to sit down, do those kinds of things and have it all on film so that you can then go back and you can watch it and you can also pause it and screen grab those shots. That's why I kind of always like pause for my front, back and side. And then you are going to spot things that you would never have spotted in the mirror, particularly with those back shots. As soon as you start to like twist around to look in the back mirror, you've ruined it because your garment's not hanging how it would if you were just standing naturally.
Yeah. And I can attest to all this because, Kate, you've been so sweet in helping me fit my Langston trousers, and I've been sending you little videos in my neutral position, slowly moving around, and you've been able to spot things that there's no way I could spot myself if I was trying to like twist around and look into the full-length mirror myself. So I can attest that this definitely works.
And it's really helpful for me when students send me videos rather than pictures.
Good to know. Right, so now let's get into the weeds a little bit with making the actual tweaks and adaptations. So Serena has an amazing question. Serena asks, this is probably a bit abstract / nerdy question. Love that. But is there a way or a method to visualize what a change in a 2D pattern piece, for example, a curvier or shallower sleeve head, means to the final 3D garment without making a million twirls? Serena says, I find it hard to understand how pattern pieces fit together and how changes to one piece impact the final result. Serena adds, if the answer is years of experience, fine, but maybe there's something better out there than the eternal trial and error. Okay. Is the answer years of experience?
Kind of. But I have a couple of tricks that might help.
Yay!
First of all, love a nerdy question. I am here for it, always. Okay, so it is kind of years of experience, but you don't have to do a fabric toile. So let's say, for example, you are, let's say, shortening your sleeve head height. Instead of cutting my bodice, my front and back bodice and my sleeve out in calico and stitching it together to be like, what have I done? Quite often pin my paper pattern together. So I will fold my darts close on the corner of the table. I'll put my shoulders together and my side seams together, and I'll just pin it in place so that I basically have a paper version of my garment. Put it on my mannequin or myself. It's much more difficult if you're putting it on a body because you don't want to rip the paper, obviously, but try and be careful with it. And then I can take my sleeve, pin my underarms together, and then hold that up to my armhole on my mannequin. Now, of course, it's not fabric, so it doesn't pin together perfectly on that armhole, but it gives me an idea of where it's going to sit and how it's going to hang. It gives me an idea of the angle, like the pitch that my sleeve is hanging at. And you can do that with all areas of your patterns. So those paper mock-ups are really, really helpful if you're struggling to visualize what's going to happen.
And you can also kind of walk things round as well, can't you, with paper, just to check if the measurements have been affected in any way.
Yeah, absolutely. And that helps with checking your notches as well.
Okay, well, hopefully we'll save Serena a little bit of calico. Great. Now, Flor has an excellent question. So Flor asks, Flor wants to know how to decide when the fit is good enough. This is such a good and important question. Flor continues, with the opportunity to tweak every aspect of a garment, which obviously we love because we don't have to accept, poorly fitting clothing when we're making it ourselves, I often find myself trying to improve small issues that I would never have noticed in ready-to-wear clothes. When do you stop? Or from the other side, which fit issues do you start with in order to make the biggest improvements to get good enough? Are there rules like, as long as X fits well, no one's going to notice what happens with Y? This is such an important... I almost feel like we could do a whole episode on this.
I feel like we actually could.
Let's just dib on it and then maybe pencil that in for another time.
I feel like this is so relevant to the trousers that you've been sending me on Instagram as well, because we were just kind of being like, oh, what about this? What about this? What about this? And you were the one that was like, should I just leave it here? And I was like, actually, yeah.
Yeah, walk away.
Yeah, probably. Look, I think it really depends. Some people are uber perfectionists and will happily put in the work to do like 8 or 9 toiles to get it perfect. My personal opinion is if you put the time in, make 8 or 9 toiles, spend 6 months making something, you can't control what happens to your body. You might, like me, get an injury and your body might change shape. You might lose some weight. You might put on some weight. You can put in 6 months of work to get the perfect garment and then your body changes shape and it's no longer perfect.
Yeah. You won't even like the garment 6 months later.
Right. It's kind of like, what do you want for the process and what are you willing to compromise on? There's always going to be things you can change and tweak. Like, nothing is ever perfect. I think that's true for any kind of creative practice. You talk to any artist or anything as well. The hardest thing is learning when to say it's done.
When to put the paintbrush down.
Exactly. It's the same. When should I put my pattern away? So yeah, it depends on you and what you're willing to compromise on. Of course, there are things that like you do need to address, things like length changes. So again, thinking about trousers, like your rise height is going to be a massive difference to your trousers. Things like your bust point position on a garment and on a bodice, things like your dart width. So is your dart big enough for the shape of your bust? Things like neckline positions, you don't want to be strangled, shoulder angles, like major things like that need to be addressed. But if it's a little wrinkle here that you're not really sure what it is, and it is just minor, and it's going to hold you back for like 3 months when really you just want to make a really gorgeous top for yourself and feel like you've achieved something and enjoy the process, then I'd probably say let it be.
So things that literally may restrict you or limit your movement in some way or just make you feel not comfortable or, it's too short or too long. So length, checking there's enough width. These are the things we need to focus on more than anything.
Yeah, so I would say my major red flags when I'm fitting a garment are things like my circumference measurements. Is it too tight or too loose? Obviously, that's a major one. And that's quite a simple, easy one to fix. My other red flag is shaping. So that includes things like the position of my shaping, therefore the length of my garment. So is my bust point and my dart apexes of my bust darts in the right place? If they're not in the right place, is it a case of just lowering the dart, or is it that the whole length of the garment is incorrect? So it's length, but questioning it from both angles, always analysing and deciding what actually needs to be done. Same thing with trousers. Is my rise height correct? Do I need to make it shorter? Have I got excess dropping somewhere else in my trouser but coming from my rise? Those major things.
Which is what we just found out with mine.
Exactly, yeah. And I also just fitted my trouser block yesterday and I pinched out about 6 centimetres of extra length that I didn't need in there.
Oh, wow. Right, yeah. So with my trousers, there was some pooling in the back thigh, wasn't there, of excess fabric. And then you had me pinch a wedge out of the upper rise, which I never would have thought to try. And it just eliminated that in an amazing, magical way.
Yeah, but then the flip side is that because you're then making your rise shorter, the bottom of your rise then basically gives you a giant wedgie. So then you have to go in and scoop that out.
We scooped. I scooped for days.
You're not alone. I've just done it as well. So it's totally normal. Those two adjustments kind of fit together.
Yeah. So it's addressing those major things, making a toile, or, you know, adjusting your toile, trying it on again, and then just seeing if that's then had a knock-on effect in some other way, because that can happen, obviously, can't it?
Yeah,
as you just
absolutely.
said.
And if you are creating knock-on effects, it doesn't mean that you're doing it wrong. Like, it's really normal that you fix one thing and it creates another issue.
That's really good to know. It's not a failing of what you're doing, it's just the natural process.
Yeah, it's like a byproduct of what you're doing.
Great. But then if there's an extra little, it's a funny little bit of little kind of wrinkly bit or something, and it's not clear, because you could with trousers especially, you could just be fitting and fitting for years, because with trouser pattern pieces, I think they have to do so much work, don't they? The front and the back, they're going around so many curves and dimensions and shapes. Like it's kind of amazing that we can get it anywhere close, really, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And sometimes I think you do just have to be like, that's enough.
Yeah, totally. And what fits perfectly one day isn't going to fit perfectly another. You know, I don't know about you, my body changes shape regularly throughout the day or throughout my cycle or things like that. Exactly. So if I fit in the morning, it might fit perfectly, and then by dinner time it fits completely differently.
Or unbuttoning those jeans, yeah.
Yeah. So you do have to kind of draw your own line on it, on what you're willing to live with and compromise with.
And as well, you made a really good point when I was fitting my trousers as well, that the fabric that I'm going to be making my final pair of trousers in is not necessarily going to behave exactly like calico. Like, it's quite similar. Like I'm going to be using a denim, but it's not going to quite have that crispness. So some of the, you know, the fabric that you can see, or the things that are going on, especially if it's a print as well. That's another thing to mention. Like, a lot of what you may be analysing with a calico or a muslin or some sort of plain fabric, are you even going to notice that when it's A, in its final fabric, and B, if you're using a print?
Agreed completely. And if you get it to look really nice in a calico, it's going to look amazing in the real fabric. You know, like, calico is like your worst case scenario.
Yeah, no one's walking around wearing calico for a reason. Oh, amazing. I love that. And don't you just think that if you're doing any adjustments, it's going to make your final product look so much better than if you made nothing anyway. So the fact that you're even trying to do any, you're going to get a better outcome, and you should be really pleased with your efforts as well.
Totally, yeah. And I think also everyone needs to be like easy on themselves and aware of like their skill level and their experience level. If you're new to fitting adjustments and it takes you a little bit longer to get it where you want it to be, that's okay. You're learning. It's part of the process. Trying to get like the perfect, and I say this in inverted commas because it doesn't really exist, like the perfect garment when you're new to this world is almost impossible. It takes time and experience. So work with what you've got and be kind to yourself and be proud of every little win that you have along the way.
Absolutely, absolutely. I always say that when I'm teaching like a beginner sewing class, like, you'll learn about your body. You cannot help but learn about your body when you start making your own clothes, and just finding out a few things that your body needs and just addressing them every single time, and you get quicker. Before you know it, you'll be like doing a small bust adjustment or doing a short torso adjustment, like almost automatically, won't you?
Yeah, it becomes instinctive.
Yeah. Great. Okay, so Gail it's a short question, but it's a goodie. Gail asks, any tips on transferring the results of fitting a toile back to the pattern? Amazing question.
Love this question. So anyone who's ever done any fitting classes with me before knows that I take a really organic approach to fitting. I'm not one of those people that kind of looks at it and goes, okay, based on exactly how it looks, you need 5 mil here and 3 mil there, and we're going to scoop this. It's not how I work. I like to get much more hands-on and stuck in with it. So I'm all about pinning and marking on your actual garment and getting your toile to look how you want it to look, right? So you're using your mock-up, your toile, to the best of its abilities. You're pinning out, you're pinning fabric in, you're cutting into it, you're drawing on it, you're unpicking your darts and repinning them where you actually want them. But then taking that garment that you have drastically changed and somehow figuring out how to get that onto your pattern is really difficult.
Yes.
I get it. I totally get it. So your best friend in this scenario is going to be your tracing wheel. Any bits of fabric that you have pinned out, any wedges that you've pinned out, I would, where your pins are, take a highlighter or a felt tip marker and draw over your pins, unpin your pins, and then unpick your seams so your piece is flat.
Oh, I like that.
And then basically get your tracing wheel, pin your calico to your pattern, perfectly aligned, get your tracing wheel, and then trace over those marks. Things like, if we're pinning that rise out of that wedge out of your back rise, we can pin that out, mark it in, and then lay that over our pattern, and then literally trace through, and we have the exact amount that we're taking out in the exact place that we're taking it out.
Oh, that is so good. I would like to make one extra addition to this. This is something that I've learned the hard way. When you make a change to your toile, mark that straight away on your pattern piece before you go back in again, because I had with the trousers, I scooped the crotch. No, sorry, I lowered the crotch point. Then I had to stop and make dinner. I didn't mark it in. And then I tried it on again. I was like, I think I needed to put a bit more out. And then I went straight back in the toile and got some more out. I was like, I didn't mark the first lot. So I was like, I don't know now.
Yeah, it's difficult.
Mark every step back on the pattern would be my addition to your point.
Oh, I have another tip as well. So don't ever cut anything away. So if we're scooping out the rise, don't trim it away, snip into it. You might end up having like little tabs inside your garment that are like 4 or 5 centimeters long. That's okay, because then when you turn your trouser, the like one leg inside the other, and lay it on top of your pattern, you still have your cut edge of your original rise, and you can lay that over and use that as like your reference point.
Can we go back in time and you tell me that about 3 weeks ago?
I'm sorry.
Such a good point. Yeah, don't cut anything away. Yeah, so if you need to release that curve, you've got a convex curve and you want to kind of turn it through so it's concave, or the other way around, whatever, you know what I mean. Yeah, snip into it rather than trim it away.
Yeah, and unpick your old stitch line. As long as you've got your cut line to line up with, you're fine. So unpick the old stitch line, just snip into it.
Amazing. Awesome. Okay, so we've got one more question from Sarah. Sarah has a question which is how to do fitting without the fabric waste of multiple toiles. Is there a way of fitting on the fly, as it were? Which is a good question because we don't want to be wasting tons and tons and tons of calico.
Yeah, this is very, very true. Unfortunately, though, we do need toiles to fit. There are things we can do to make that slightly less wasteful. So I think using your toile to its the best of its like abilities. So testing your pattern amendments on your toile, like we were saying, actually pinning and cutting and snipping and drawing and doing all those things.
Yeah, you don't need to like make an adjustment and then get a whole fresh new bit of calico and start again, do you?
Yeah, you can do those changes and you can recut just part of your toile. So let's say you've done a full bust adjustment, but you've got a full toile, you can just unpick your shoulders, your side seams, your waist, and just replace those front panels if the rest of the dress fits well.
That is such a good point.
You can also, if you, let's say you make a toile with like a voluminous skirt, you make your final one, perfect, and now you're like, what do I do with this leftover calico? I've got this enormous skirt. You can use those bigger pieces and cut smaller pieces out of them, which is really helpful, I think. I often like unpick my toiles and like will keep my skirts particularly. So I do a lot of like bespoke wedding dresses. Wedding dresses are big. So often we'll like keep those giant skirts and cut like a bodice block or something.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It's something that I've started to do as well. Like I've been trying to move away from using fusible interfacing because I'm a bit worried about what happens when it washes and what happens to all that glue and the synthetic fibers when you're washing your garment. So I've been actually reusing some of the calico from my toiles to use as a kind of like sew-in interfacing as well, because it is so stable, isn't it? That's one of its properties. You know, it's been working really, really well, for example, with hat brims as well. I was making some bucket hats and stuff like that. So there are other ways you can use that, even if there isn't in another toile you can get out of it as well, I think.
I love that idea. And I also, someone said that they were shredding their toiles and using them as like stuffing for things. I've done that with my little like tailor's ham, but one of my students, I think, made like a poof for her feet to go on, which surprising amount of scraps you
A
need
lot
for
of
that. So
toiles,
it's quite
yeah.
a good way of like collecting all your scraps.
Amazing. Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you so much for fielding these amazing questions. Like I've learned a ton already. So a lot of what the answers you were talking about was like kind of analyzing things. And sometimes it is hard to know what to look for, isn't it? Like, is there a way that people can work with you if, for example, they want to make their own block and they want to then fit it as you were suggesting, you know, and saying it does take time?
Yeah, absolutely. So I recently launched my memberships in my community.
Ooh, tell us about that.
It is honestly like my favorite thing in the world. I love it so much. I'm genuinely like, why didn't I do this sooner? Because it is the best. So all of my online courses, or most of my online courses rather, are now within that community. So if you're a member, you get access to my block drafting courses, which have their own fitting modules as well, where we look at individual fitting issues. That's how to spot them, how to pin your garment, and then how to transfer that onto your pattern and how to adjust your pattern. And that's for individual issues, and there's lots of them in there. So I have a bodice one and a trouser one. Then you also get access to all of my drafting courses. That's how to take those blocks and transform them into endless amazing things. That's just level one. Level two is where we delve deeper into how to draft your own patterns. So we take it up a notch. We go from those beginner skills into intermediate ones. Now, of course, when you're learning to analyze and to fit garments, sometimes an online course doesn't quite cut it. Sometimes you need to ask questions, you need some help, you need a buddy that you could just be like, hey, what does this mean? And my answer to that is my Q&A sessions. So we have monthly Q&A sessions where students can send me photographs, videos, bring questions along, and we jump on a Zoom call as a group and we discuss them and I give my feedback and we just talk about them. They are the best.
Oh, I bet that would be fascinating as well to learn from the other students as well, and some fit issues that maybe you don't have on your personal body, but maybe you could then, I don't know, help friends and or you know when you're making clothes for other people as well.
Yeah. And the way I run those sessions is everyone gets like one question to begin with, and then when everyone's had their one question, if we have time, then people can have a second one. So I will often go around if it's a slightly smaller group, and I'll be like, "Oh, hi, so and so. Like, you've been quiet. Do you have a question? How can I help? Like, what have you been up to?" And so often they'll be like, "I haven't got a question. I'm just here as like a fly on the wall because I want to see what other people are doing and learn from them." And it's so great. That community aspect of like learning from each other and also helping each other is really cool.
Amazing. So tell us more about the membership. How does it work?
So it's a monthly membership, and there are two levels. So level one is aimed more at beginners, people who are new to pattern cutting and are wanting to draft their own blocks from their own measurements, and then also learn how to take those blocks and turn them into something new. So that covers things like dart rotation, slash and spread, how to draft different types of sleeves, different necklines, those like really core pattern cutting skills that are going to be the thing that you build all of your knowledge on top of.
So how are those things you go away and work on at home, or are they live classes? How is that taught?
So they're all online courses and self-paced online courses. So
Nice.
that the great thing about that is you can do them no matter where you are in the world, no matter what time zone you're in.
Yeah, and all your own personal schedule and when you've got free time and yeah.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. So you can really fit those around your own life. Then you have the Q&A sessions, which of course are live, so they are at certain times, but you can bring any questions that you have along to those. You can also message any questions you have, so you can DM me directly and you can email me, and you can also comment within the courses. There's like comment boxes, and if you want
great.
to post it publicly, again, lovely to learn from other students as well. And then there's also the community space, and that's kind of like a Facebook page, I guess, where like you can post on the wall and people can comment on it. You can put pictures, you can share your work. It's great. Somebody recently made a little skirt that they did based on like the monthly tutorial that we have, and it was just great to see their interpretation of that. So that's level 1. You also get a monthly tutorial where I will kind of teach a new skill. It could be how to draft like a skirt. We did a bubble skirt in December, and then it could also be teaching a new skill. So we did like how to cut slippery fabric. So I took my professional knowledge and did a step-by-step on how to cut like satin basically, or organza, things like that. So that's like monthly. So level 2 is aimed at people who have gone through that process or have that knowledge already. So you've got the basics down. You're thinking, great, I have my blocks. I know how to do some basic changes to it. I want to do something a bit more to push myself. That could be things like I want to learn how to drape. We have a draping course in there. I want to learn how to draft evening dresses or a wedding dress, things like that. My evening dress course is in there. We also have a quarterly deep dive project where we basically deep dive into a new type of garment. So again, thinking about adding those skills to your toolkit, basically. So we are just about to finish our creative shirts project, where students learn how to draft different shirt details, different colours, different types of openings, plackets, those kinds of things, different silhouettes. So we did a big oversized shirt, we did one with lots of gathers, we did one with like a grown-on tie, and then we went through how to combine those. So to take those silhouettes and those details and make one completely new design. And then students went away and they designed their own shirts. They drafted their own shirts, they made a toile, and then we had a fitting module where we learned all about fitting.
Oh, wow.
Then they fitted their toile and mended their pattern, and they are in the process now of making their final shirt. So those deep dive projects is the whole process from designing to finished garment, and it's so cool. I love it so much. To see it all coming together is bringing me such joy.
That must be so satisfying. So how do people sign up? How long do they sign up for? Is it something you sign up for a year or something?
Okay, so at the time of release, I believe we will be in the middle of my open doors. I only open the membership for new members a couple of times a year, and I try to align it with the beginning of a new deep dive project. So nice. We are currently in open doors. We'll be in open doors until the 13th of April, and then we will be closed for new members until July.
Right.
So the new deep dive project is all about jumpsuits. How to design, draft and fit your jumpsuits. I am pumped. I'm so excited.
Oh, I love a jumpsuit. Ooh.
They're so fun, right? It's going to be great.
It's like a dress, but you can run to the bus.
Right? Yeah. And jumpsuits are so versatile as well. It doesn't have to be like super fitted. It can also be like quite loose, like kind of dungarees. Still a jumpsuit.
Stop, you're tempting me. I don't have time for you.
So you can only join in those open doors.
Which makes sense, because you don't want to rock on up halfway through and you've already covered a bunch of stuff and then you're having to try and play catch up.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. And it's difficult from a learning perspective if you're the student who's coming halfway through a project. It's difficult from a learning perspective for you, but it also then interrupts the other students. And the great thing about the community is that we are all there together, learning together and sharing that knowledge. So that's why I've limited it, that you can only join for certain periods. It is monthly, so if you join and you think, this is amazing, you join for 3 months and then life gets in the way, as we all know it does, and then you think, I just don't have the time for this anymore, you can cancel. You can also join for a full year and then you get a little discount as well.
Oh, amazing. Brilliant. So where can people find you and everything that you do?
So you can find me on Instagram. I'm at Project Patterns, and then you can also find me on my website, www.project-patterns.co.uk.
Awesome. And you've got the information of how to sign up for your membership levels there.
Absolutely, yeah. It's all on the website there.
Amazing. Thank you so much. This has been so good. We covered tons and it was all so useful. I think to pretty much every question will be useful to most people. So it was just amazing. Thank you so much for bringing so much value to Check Your Thread.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And thank you so much to everyone who sent questions in. They were honestly great. I love the in-depth nerdy questions. I'm here for them all the time.
Yes. Okay. Brilliant. Thank you so much. Take care, Kate.
Thanks. Bye.
thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode and are left feeling inspired. For more info about the podcast, including show notes for this and every episode, head to checkyourthread.com. I'd love to hear from you, so if you have any comments, questions or ideas for future episodes, please get in touch by emailing zoe@checkyourthread.com or find me on Instagram @checkyourthread. Massive thanks to Patrick Potter for production support, to Sylvia Seller for the awesome logo design, and to Simon at Palm Skin Productions for the music. This ad-free podcast would not be possible without listener support, so if you feel you are able, please consider signing up to the Check Your Thread Patreon. For the equivalent of buying me a coffee each month, you'll be making it possible to continue producing regular episodes. Links can be found in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. I hope you'll listen again next week. Until then, take care. Bye!